Hello my beautiful watchers, your boy is back in his home country of Great Britain. I am cold as heck and I have just watched Dune Part 2. How are you guys doing? Now this is just going to be my initial thoughts, but now that both halves are out, once we've had a little time to ruminate on it, I'm sure that I'll do a full detailed breakdown somewhere down the line. That said, spoiler warning for the book and this film. If you've not seen it yet and for some bizarre reason were waiting to hear what I thought about it before doing so, go in peace, my child. It has some ups and downs, but overall it has earned my seal of approval. For my boys, gals, and non-binary pals who just got back from seeing Denis Villeneuve finish what he started 4 years ago, let's talk adaptation. So, overall story-wise, I would say they hit all of the essential plot beats. Paul winning over the Fremen, his mum becoming a reverend mother, him learning how to surf a 700-meter-long worm, being reunited with his best pal Gurney, using atomic bombs to blow a hole in a cliff, capturing the emperor of the human race and forcing him to accept him as his replacement, and going toe-to-toe with Feyd Rautha Harkonnen. Speaking of, I was actually a little surprised to see young Feyd, considering, as I mentioned when I talked about Part 1, he wasn't set up early the same way Roban was, but he was a welcome addition nonetheless. I thought it was a really interesting touch that they gave him his own Gom Jabbar test. It never occurred to me to wonder if anyone else within Paul's lifetime had been tested on their level of humanity, this being a multi-millennia experiment after all. I've got a couple of points I want to talk about regarding Feyd's gladiatorial match. First of all, why were the two extra Atreides muscle men at least partially CGI? Did anyone else think that was a little weird? They weren't like, unusual modified humans like the arena guards or anything like that. They were just big dudes. More importantly though, they changed basically everything regarding the hidden meanings and politics behind that particular fight. The movie portrays the Atreides soldier not being drugged before the fight as the Baron testing Feyd's courage and skill while giving him a chance to look like a hero in front of the population of Genndy Prime. Originally, that whole setup was actually Feyd's doing, and it was absolutely still a rigged fight, as Feyd's sword was poisoned and the prisoner had been hypnotized to lose all control over his muscles if Feyd said a particular keyword. The little Harkonnen just wanted the credit for winning an even match, but not the actual danger, and he got to frame a Harkonnen rival in the process. All of this was way too clever to be his idea, of course, which brings us to Fuia Howard. Remember how I said he was underused in the first movie? Well, he's just plain not in this one. I guess he just died off screen at some point. Bummer. So, we don't get to see him fall to the dark side because he thought that Jessica was the inside man who betrayed the Duke and end up working for the Harkonnens in the hope of getting revenge on her in a colossal disregard for irony and hypocrisy, only for him to redeem himself in his final moments by refusing to kill Paul when he had the chance. In general, I got the impression that Villeneuve just wasn't interested in the Mentats in any way, shape or form, which is kind of a shame. The fact that certain humans have replaced computers in this society is a huge building block of the Dune universe. Despite 3 attempts now, Howard is yet to have a decent adaptation. I had real hopes for this one, but he is just MIA. Getting into the seriously nerdy here, I think this film may have overplayed its hand somewhat when it comes to futuristic weapons. They cut out a lot of the reasons why you can't use them in most fights, like if you hit a personal shield with a laser gun, both devices explode, that sort of thing. So because there were less consequences for using them, they ended up using them a lot more. But, the more you show that rocket launchers and energy weapons are effective, the more ridiculous it looks that people choose to use medieval weaponry most of the time. Like, think about that mass charge of Fremen and Sardaukar in the film's climax. Like, one guy with one of those blue lasers could have done a sweep and wiped out the entire army. If some of them are wearing shields, oh well, we'll pick those ones off later. Don't get me wrong, you know your boy loves him some swords, but if you don't stick to the iron-hard reasons why warfare is the way that it is that Frank Herbert set up, it all just kind of falls apart. Them feeling that they needed to explain why Shani's American while Stilgar and the other Fremen had thick accents was pretty funny. I honestly hadn't really thought about it until they mentioned it. Irulan and her Princess Diaries was a nice touch adaptation-wise. Most chapters of Dune start with excerpts from the books that she wrote about Paul. I would describe this version of worm riding as lower and faster. Those guys are really booking. Looks cool as fuck though. Once again, I am really not in love with this movie's take on Jessica. Thankfully, she's not having constant panic attacks anymore, but they seem to be really playing up the worst parts of her character from the book, like her manipulation and harshness, while ignoring her redeeming features like like how she came to accept Shaie and love her like a daughter, and how much she genuinely adored and loved her children above all else. It was interesting that they decided to have the decision to become a Reverend Mother forced on her by the Fremen, as, you know, first of all it takes away her agency in the matter, and makes Paul seem like a total dick for only being mildly interested in the fact that his mother might die and will definitely be permanently changed by this transformation. BT dubs, I am aware that it is inconsistent of me to defend Jessica while I was so harsh on Catelyn Stark, but I guess I've just become a bit more forgiving of the mother who thinks she knows best about everything archetype as I get older. Another character that didn't make the cut was Hara, Jameis's widow, who, according to Fremen law, now belongs to Paul after he killed him. She's actually pretty annoyed that he didn't choose to take her as a lover, but comes to accept it and tries to be a good friend to him, harbouring no ill will about him shanking her hubby as it was done in honourable combat. It's a really interesting example of how unusual the Fremen were in the book. In general, I don't think we got the same level of world building regarding Fremen culture as we got originally. They mostly seem to exist just to fight Harkonnens and be intensely religious. Oh yeah, they also skipped over Fade attempting to assassinate his uncle using a poisoned child sex slave. Yeah, I don't think we needed to see that. On a lighter note, it amused me that the so-called drum sand makes actual drum sounds when you hit it in this film. I don't think that name was supposed to be literal, but I could be wrong. We belatedly got Paul's 23andMe results and the plot twist that his mortal enemy is in fact his grandfather. Better late than never, though the flashback to Jessica as a baby and them digitally removing her smile as the Baron looms over her was a little weird and distracting. So, probably one of the biggest differences between this movie and the book is the lack of a time skip. Originally, after Jessica chugs the Water of Life, the story jumps forward, I think about 5 years, give or take. Paul's little sister Alia's been born and is already talking like an adult. Paul and Shaie have been an item for quite a while and have a child together, and Paul's been kicking the shit out of the Harkonnen for long enough to have won the respect of the Fremen, who are pretty much universally convinced he is in fact the chosen one. He does still have to try out sandworm riding though, and because he is such a badass at this point, the Fremen are starting to think it's a little odd that he's never tried something even their teenagers can do. Anyways, it hadn't occurred to me that that missing time period would be a rich vein of adaptation material to tap into, but they obviously did, and you know, I think they did a good job with it. I mean, I wouldn't say it was absolutely necessary to add more to the story. If Villeneuve wasn't so determined to make these movies 2.5 hours long, they could probably have just stuck to the existing chapters, but if you are going to stretch things out, there are worse ways of going about it. If nothing else, the extra scenes of them taking out the Harkonnen spice harvesters was cool as heck. I was still expecting there to be some sort of time jump afterwards though, but they ended up just moving all of the later events to way sooner in the timeline. A side effect of this is that Alia doesn't have time to be born, and it looks like the First Later the Second isn't going to exist at all, which, I mean, I guess is less emotionally devastating for Paul and Shaie, as it means he's not killed at the end in a Sardaukar raid. While I'm willing to grudgingly admit that Alia isn't essential to the plot of this particular story, them setting her up so hard and not delivering, see what I did there, was kind of frustrating for me personally. Plus, I really liked how a wee child was the one who killed the seemingly invincible conniving Baron. I just don't know how I feel about the conflict they added between Paul and the apparently militant atheist Shaie. Book Shaie was a wise and intelligent advisor and a badass warrior, but she was pretty go with the flow when it came to Paul assuming the role of Lisan al-Gaib, and accepted his political marriage with the Princess Irulan pretty quickly, on the grounds that he was clearly planning for it to be a marriage in name only, while she was treated as his de facto wife. In fact, Jessica reassuring her on this very thing is the last line of the book, so it was clearly something that mattered to Herbert. But now Shaie spends the entire movie loudly arguing against the Fremen religion and Paul's part in it.
He's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy! Now go away!
After a while, it takes over a pretty big part of the movie, and the story now ends on her looking crushed when Paul demanded the princess marry him and storming off to furiously summon a sandworm Uber as Paul starts his holy war. And I don't know, maybe it's because I was just hyper aware that that's not how it went down in the book, but This whole thing felt a little forced to me. I'd be curious to know how those of you who went into the story cold felt about it. Oh, and I have to admit, I was not expecting this movie to make such a hard push for Dune Messiah to get an adaptation. Even taking into account that the book's ending is already a setup for a longer story, it feels like they were going out of their way to jam in a not insignificant amount of sequel baiting, even at the cost of going off-book in places. I mean, it didn't end on a full cliffhanger. This could be considered an ending if you don't mind a few dangling plot threads, like Shani and Paul's breakup, Alia still being a talking fetus, and the Bene Gesserit that forced Fade to knock her up, but it's clearly an intentional play for another movie. It is going to be fascinating if they get their wish, because the rest of the Dune books are so frickin' weird, and they absolutely don't follow any sort of hero's journey format. I have no idea how they would translate into these sorts of films. Anyways, I think this version of Dune might be a slight victim of its own success adaptation-wise, as they did such a good job with the parts that they included, the missing parts stood out all the more to me. But I liked it. It's stunningly beautiful, well acted, well directed, most of these special effects are super solid, and while it has some pacing issues here and there, it never got fully boring. Mr. Villeneuve chats a lot of utter bollocks in interviews sometimes, but he can deliver a damn solid Arrakis. And I hope he gets that sequel, I really do. You can't leave Zendaya looking that angry forever, it's just not right. See you next time.